iOS betas give, iOS betas taketh away. I'm iCaveDave and I simplify Apple so that everything just works for you, and if you want the latest Apple news, leaks and rumours every weekday at 12 UTC, like this video, subscribe to the channel and ring that bell. And yes, Apple has released some new betas, and some features have been pushed beyond the 15.0 release, so let's talk about that. Apple is clearly not quite happy with how SharePlay is working. SharePlay is their way to watch with friends via FaceTime on various different video platforms, and the feature has been disabled with iOS 15's 6th beta release. Now, it's not clear whether this is because of performance or stability issues with the feature, or if Apple ran into some sort of licensing issues that are taking longer to resolve than expected, as the feature does allow subscribers to share Play with friends who aren't subscribed to some services, as far as I understand it. Not only this, but in the same beta, Apple has also added back the option for iPhone Safari to have the current or traditional layout with the address bar way up at the top there like it does on the current iOS 14. Hands up in the comments if you're already using the public or Daredevil developer betas on your phone, and if you are, did you like that low down address bar redesign? I think I kind of like it, but I do quite often refresh a page when I'm trying to just start typing in the bar. But to be fair, in the past, Apple has quite often released products that I didn't know I wanted, so I guess maybe I just didn't know that I wanted to refresh the page. I did think I wanted to type though. We also got new beta software for the Apple Watch, bringing back the ability to have automatically switching watch faces, which was disabled in the last beta, but more importantly, it gives me an incredibly seamless and smooth segue that I doubt you guys will even have noticed. Reports say that the Apple Watch Series 7 will be getting the redesign that we've been hoping for, with the flat sides, the flat face, and everything else. And now it lines up almost perfectly with the designs that John Prosser and Renders by Ian put out earlier this year, a few months back, and it's basically in line with what I actually predicted last August, which also happens to be the first month that I got in touch with Render Boy Apple Tomorrow, and he made these renders that you can see on the screen now. Now, the latest leaks were actually CAD files, which happily include measurements, which means we kind of know that we're already going to be keeping the 40 and 44-inch display sizes, but with that flatter glass on the face and flatter sides, giving a much closer design to the iPad Pro and iPhone 12 design language, and these leaks have come via 91 Mobiles. Now, there are also some separate reports that Apple is investigating some new health sensors, because they always do, and based on the recent patent filings, the latest sensor describes a pair of surface electrodes against your wrist, which can measure how hydrated or dehydrated or unihydrated you are. Is that even a thing? Is that a thing? There's no real suggestion that this would come in the 2021 Apple Watch, but there have been very few other rumours of health sensors that are actually expected this year, although if I was going to put money on a particular health sensor, body temperature seems like the easiest one to implement and would actually give the biggest bang for your buck. So, what do you think of the new Apple Watch redesign? Do you like that flat-sided look? A lot of people have said they don't think it looks comfortable. I don't think that'll be a problem because you've got the rounded base underneath. I think that bit's fine. It's more about the aesthetics. Do you like the way it looks? Answers down in the comments section. And speaking of the comments section, that is where you can ask me any question you want using hashtag iCaveAnswers. And a few people have done that in the past couple of days, so we might as well answer their questions too, because otherwise it seems a bit pointless. Tim Kinetics asks, iCaveAnswers, did I waste £1,000 on the M1 iPad Pro this year? Or do you still think we'll get some kind of Pro apps that use all that horsepower? I'm starting to think that I should have got an iPad Air and saved £400. For Lightroom, LumaFusion and general computing, my partner's iPad Air seems to be just as snappy as the iPad Pro. Now, I understand why so many people are concerned about this. Snappiness, you are going to get that snappiness regardless, because that is all about the single core performance, which will be exactly the same between the A14 and the M1, because they use exactly the same cores. They use A14 cores. Where the difference is going to come is time that it takes to do rendering with things like LumaFusion. You've also got the extra RAM in there, and you've also got just more of those compute cores, basically more of those high performance cores. Now, as I've mentioned, I have a theory that we will be getting these Pro apps this year, specifically because of a couple of things. Number one, we haven't had the iPads registered yet with the EEC. I'm going to keep going on about this because nobody else seems to be talking about it, and I think this might actually be key. So I think we might be getting an October event that introduces not only the new iPads, but also the new versions of Final Cut and the other Pro apps. And the main reason for this as well is that Apple did book in to exhibit, I believe, at the National Association of Broadcasters conference in Las Vegas, and the last time they did that was a decade ago, and guess what they were doing? They were introducing Final Cut 10. Now, I know a lot of people were very disappointed that there weren't Pro apps introduced at WWDC, but thinking about it, that's not how Apple does these things. They introduce operating systems at WWDC, and individual apps get released later at consumer events because that's where they get used. These things don't go into a public beta, therefore they wouldn't be released at WWDC. So fingers crossed we get our Pro apps. Evan Rogers asks, iCave Answers, any chance we get a minor refresh of the iPad Air with 5G this fall, or will we have to wait until the spring? I'm ready to buy an iPad Air, but the lack of 5G is disappointing. Now, I know there's been a lot more talk about iPad Mini getting a refresh. Now, I'd be very surprised if Apple doesn't refresh the iPad Air this autumn, just the same as they do with that new iPad Mini design. I just think that the iPad Mini is going to get more of the attention because it is new. But other than that, I don't see why they couldn't even use exactly the same board in the iPad Air and the iPad Mini, just fill the extra space in the iPad Air with a bit more battery, because it looks like they're going to put an A15 into the iPad Mini, which is exactly what we'd be expecting in the iPad Air. Just make sure we put in those 5G chips and everyone's going to be happy, it looks like. Alan B Unboxings and News asks multiple questions, so let's go for it. What is your favourite Apple computer ever? Probably the Power Mac G4. Favourite iPhone ever? My current one, the 12 Pro Max. Favourite iPad ever? This is one of the strange ones because it's not the most powerful kind of newest iPad Pro 12.9 inch. That's not my favourite. The iPad Air that I've got is actually my favourite iPad that I've ever used. I'm sure the other ones are better, but this is my favourite. What's your favourite Apple Watch ever? Again, you could go for just the newest one, but I love my SE, but I probably would prefer the 6. And favourite iPod or iPod Touch ever would be, for me, it would be the iPod Nano. Obviously, again, the iPod Touch is a much more capable device, but the iPod Nano, I think it was the 5th or the 6th generation, which is the one that I got way before there was an Apple Watch, put it into a case on my wrist, and I felt pretty awesome. Joe asks, iCave Answers, is tea superior to coffee? For me, nope. You're right, coffee is obviously the best. And again from Joe, iCave Answers, if you were the CEO of Apple, what would be your first order of business? I would release the M1X Max. Honestly, I don't really know what I would do differently. I think I would probably like to show a little bit more of what does go on behind the scenes. I wouldn't want to show products ahead of time, but I would like to show a bit more of the culture behind the scenes at Apple, a little bit more of the way that they work, maybe have kind of workshops on productivity led by Apple executives that are not just talking about Apple products, but also the kind of philosophies behind the way that they make products, the way that they market products, the way that they think about how they approach stuff. I know they mention this sort of thing, but it would be really interesting to do something along those lines. But also MacBook SE. Vicious Dave for Life, iCave Answers, can you do a Mac versus PC video? I would love to see your thoughts overall on why the Mac is better than the PC. And if you don't know Vicious Dave, there's very few people who speak as passionately as he does about the products that he's talking about and about the kind of stuff that he's talking about on his videos, so do go and check them out. But I know that Dave has been a Mac user in the past and he's a PC user now, and I think it's mainly because of gaming that he likes to use the PCs. I don't think, for me, it's all about quality of life, and I'm not a big gamer. I play some games, I play things like Kerbal Space Program, which I think is great, but it's also a decade-old game. There is a second version coming, though, soon, so fingers crossed, but I've got a feeling that it's not coming to the Mac. But in terms of why I think the Mac is better overall, I will do a quick summary of it here, but as I've mentioned in the comments, I'm not knowledgeable enough about PCs in order to really make those comparisons. I just like the way that Macs work, and I love the way that they integrate with everything else that I have, with my iPad, especially when they get the universal control working, the way that they integrate with things like AirDrop, so when I'm filming these shows, I will AirDrop my video files from my phone to my Mac. I will copy the notes on my Mac and then paste them into the teleprompter on a different iPhone. Like, just that kind of continuity is the big thing for me. Also, the fact that I don't have to worry about backing stuff up, it just happens. My iCloud photos are just everywhere as soon as I take them. Like, everything is really well thought out, and I think that's the big thing for me. Like, I do use a Windows laptop for work, and it's a horrendous experience in comparison. It's just not as nice to use, whereas the Mac, everything kind of works the way that you would expect it to. Drag and drop works on everything, and the massive thing that I always miss when I use the laptop for work is the gestures on the trackpad. The fact you can swipe up with 4 fingers and see everything when you're working on a small screen. The fact that you can hit Command Space and get Spotlight up. The fact that you can just hit space on stuff in the Finder and see like a full preview of the files. It all just works so much better. I don't have to open everything I want. I can make PDFs without having to piss around with Adobe. So it's all that stuff and more. And yet the Mac is not perfect. It would be great if it ran games better, but I do think that we're going to be getting that later this year, because it looks like all the stuff that Valve is doing with Proton and Vulkan and all the stuff that they're doing around that to basically make the Steam Decks that they have coming out work with all of these games on Linux should be pretty much directly comparable and movable over to the Mac too, which will just make life so easy. And fingers crossed that is what happens. But thank you all so much for joining us again. As I say, if you want to ask a question, #iCaveAnswers, and we will get some more clips out from the big live stream very, very soon. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.